Hola, mi amigos. It's that time again. Yes, it's Drinks Coach. Drinks Coach UK TV. Contact me on @Vinesack, all social media, Vinesack, or all lowercase, Drinks Coach UK. Back in the saddle or the sofa, as it were, in the den. Um, nice background, hopefully. A familiar background with some people. Difference now, of course, is of course I'm filming it like that, and I've got wireless mic. Wireless mic sounds like a good name for a band. Anyway, so right, we've got a range of wines here, which were sent to me because I asked for them and they offered them. Johnny Fells, one of the great importers in this country. Uh, if you look at the lineup and how much I'm passionate about fortified wines and people like Torbrek in Russell Valley, they have a stunning range of wines. But they are a trade business. They sell to restaurants, but also sell to other people. And the lovely Annie Lim, who looks after their PR, very kindly sent me a list of what they're going to call the 12 wines of Christmas. And said, would you like to try any of them? And I didn't want to take the mick. So I picked the four I really wanted to try. And they're here. And I haven't tried them yet. That's the point. We're going to do this unseen. But I have enough information here to let you know where you can get them if you like them, etc., etc., etc. We have one white, two reds, and a fortified. We're starting off with the white wine. This is, if you're in the wine game, this is one of the most famous and recognizable labels there are. Um, uh, People tend to kind of avoid Alsace wine in this country. This is Alsace. This is French. Okay, I know it looks a bit German to some people, but it's French. To be fair, the Vosges Mountains and Alsace-Lorraine have changed hands between the Germans and the French like 50 times over the last 1,000 years. But it happens to be French at the moment. Okay, and this wine is showing the classic French variety, sorry, German variety Riesling. Okay, so that's Hugel. Hugel family. I remember Johnny Hugel with fondness, and other members of the Hugel family. Um, Shout out to Carew. This is 2022. They've owned and made wines here. I don't know how many generations it's now, but since 1639. Yeah, Americans and Australians, listen to this, right? 1639. It's like a billion ancestors. Okay, and they're still there. Um, if there's one more famous wine estate in Hugel than Hugel, it would be Trimbach. They are of equal standing, equal age, but there are estates out in Alsace which really have been around that long. What's unusual about this? I think I'll just point out things from an educational point of view. Because why are we here otherwise? This is the only wine region in the whole of France where you're allowed to put the grape varieties on the label. And in fact, the wines are named after the grape variety, sometimes named after the vineyard as well. But the vineyard is a afterthought. I wouldn't say afterthought, but it comes second. It says Riesling, Clovinsbull or something, or Muscat, Cru Goldert. And so it's saying it's a Muscat from the Goldert vineyard or whatever, um, rather than the other way around. But if there's anybody who knows how to make French Riesling, Alsace Riesling, the Hugels are it. These wines are just so delicious. The entry level wine, I would say, for Hugel and Trimbach tends to be like they tend to make a wine harder and harder to find called an Edelsvicker, which is a mix of different varieties, usually not including the regal or noble ones, which would be Pinot Gris, used to be known as Tokyo d'Alsace, and Riesling, but maybe a mix of Sylvaner, Muscat, and bits and bobs. Pinot Blanc as well. Now, this wine's the 2022 vintage, which I believe was a very good vintage, very ripe. Remember, it was hot, but also it had some good acidity that year, not like in Bordeaux, where it was kind of lent towards making much better red wines because it was so warm. But if I look at the back here, it says this wine's available at Majestic for £20. Great. London End Wines, Robin Spate, Taurus down in the Surrey Hills, Coburn's of Leith up north, Davis Bell McCraith over in Bristol. I mean, it's everywhere. Cambridge Wine Merchants, Alexander Hadley, really a very, very popular wine indeed, and really seen as a benchmark. 12.5% alcohol for an Alsace Riesling is actually quite low. It can be as much as 13 and a half. But let's have a crack at this and see what it tastes like. Because there are Rieslings and there are Rieslings. And a lot of Riesling purists tend not to go for Alsace because they're considered to be, if I'm going to use inverted commas, a little bit worked, right? A little bit kind of played. They use wood barrels, old wood barrels, where most Riesling producers are using pristine stainless steel these days. You're looking for the pristine expression of Clare Valley or New Zealand. They'll be some of the most technical wines you could possibly come across. But in Germany, you've got a mix between the slightly older and slightly newer techniques of wine. But you certainly wouldn't stir the wines or add texture to them or anything. Um, Alsace is also extremely dry for regions, and because it's arid, it suits certain varieties. And I think Riesling's one of those that actually does suit a region where vine stress really builds concentration of flavour in the wine. Um, Looking at this colour, most Riesling isn't that dark, so something's happened here, isn't it? You know, you feel like something's been done to it. Uh, how would you describe Riesling? Well, Riesling, generally speaking, tends to be, and most of it's dry, by the way, tends to be quite pure, stony, quite simple in its youth, and as it gets older, develops slightly heavy phenolics, kind of tastes almost diesely or petrolly in some cases. Some people see that as a fault, others don't. Um, this wine, you can smell, came from a vineyard, typically in the Alsace, which is very, very ripe. I'm trying to remember what village Hugel's in. Is it Rickeveer? Um, Yes, it is. It's in Rickeveer. Beautiful, beautiful medieval city with walls and a tower and everything. It's just worth going to see. And extraordinarily good restaurants there as well. If you like to eat your body weight in pork and cheese, this is your Bethlehem, really. Oh, the wine's got a very spicy nose, unusually spicy for Riesling, which tends to be purer than that. When I say spice, it's almost a hint of ginger there. But it's also got a smell which is verges on marmalade. Like there's an oranginess, an apricotiness. I don't think there's any botrytis here. There might be a hint of botrytis in the vineyard, but there's rot, which concentrates the grapes, which sometimes is responsible for marmalady flavors. But here I just think it's like full throttle heat and warmth. Oh, tart. I would say of recent Hugel Rieslings, this is one that could do with a bit of time, if I'm honest. I think I'd keep this for another couple of years. The acidity is quite marked, quite malic, quite appley, but it's an archetypal example. It really is, and unusually dry. I think for most, it's not bone dry. I think there might be a tiny bit of residual sugar in there, um, or is it dry? No, it could be dry. Um, Great with things like flammekuche, which is thin bread baked in the oven with cream, onions, and bacon on it, or something like sauerkraut would be great with this. But there you go. Hugel, can't get more classic than that. 20 squid. Take it or leave it. There you are. Lovely. That's our white wine. That's our Christmas white wine. What would I drink with that this Christmas? Great with smoked salmon. No arguing there. I do like Alsace wines with smoked salmon. They work very well. And also the prawns, the mayo, and the prawn cocktail, and the Mary Rose, all that stuff. The acidity cuts through it, but it has enough body then to follow up with a sweetness with proteinous food. Great with lobster, if you're being fancy, or crab. There you go. Enough said. So now we've got two red wines. Now, what I'm going to do here is I've got two glasses. They're not particularly clean. I'm sorry I didn't do a very good job of washing these, but I know people that follow me on this channel know that when I'm bringing out the gin chalice, this is a Solcombe gin chalice from down in Devon, um, it means you're going to drink Pinot Noir. Or the other one, yes, this time it's the other one, which is Nebbiolo from Piemonte. So I brought out a glass. For some reason, these big round glasses are just brilliant for Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo, two varieties which surely, if not spiritually, are actually related. But also with the other glass, I'm just using a red wine glass. This is the Ollie Smith large red wine glass. Shout out to you, Ollie. Which is a very good versatile red glass, I think, because it works. It's literally for me exactly halfway between where I want my Bordeaux glass and my Pinot Noir glass to be. So it's a really really good compromise between all of those different styles. Right, two glasses here. These are both wines from Fells. On this side, we have Brolio, a Chianti Classico, which is sold in the wine side at the moment at 17 quid. Now, premium, excuse me, premium Chianti Classico is never 17 quid these days. It's 21 plus. If you go buy as an independent, I imagine it is. But we're talking about the wine society here, aren't we? Do I need to play the record again? Wine Society, amazing value. If you're going to be a member of one um, membership of any kind. If you're in the wine business, then the wine society's it. They just charge less for all of their wines, and they have fantastic buying, and they have thousands of wines to choose from. It's all you ever need. 2022 was a good vintage, refreshing vintage, warm again, but good acidity. 13.5% alcohol shows you there. Broglio, which is owned and managed by Francesco Ricazzoli of Baroni di Ricazzoli, is a castle where they started making wine back in, I think it's 1141. I think it's about that. Chianti's been around a long time. Tuscany has a long reputation for wine, a lot longer than places like Bordeaux, for instance. And it's interesting how little the wines have really evolved over that time, which gives you the impression that maybe they got it right, and they've kind of finessed it to a point where there's wonderful consistency. And I think that's probably true of the top 20 or 30 producers of Chianti. Certainly, the top 10 have they've all kind of arrived at a very similar decision, I think, on what makes Sangiovese, the great grape variety of Tuscany, great. These aren't Brunellos; they're not big, powerful wines. They're not glossy, bulgary, kind of what I call footballers' wines, like Tignanello. These wines are a little bit more measured, elegant. They allow the food to shout as well when you're drinking them. And I don't think there's a more foodie wine in the world than Chianti Classico. It's literally like adding sauce to your steak. Red meat, beef, grilled meat with Chianti Classico is for me the perfect match. It's also fantastic with duck liver pate or a parfait, foie gras pate, whatever. It's just one of those wines that does brilliantly with those sort of flavors. Iron rich, offal, game, beef, delicate flavors too. So for 17 quid, what do you get at the Wine Society? Well, you get a lot. Okay. I haven't tried this vintage of this wine yet, but here we go. Um, it's not deep in colour, but it's got some colour. This wine is, I believe, 100% Sangiovese. I think Brody is 100% Sangiovese. And I like my Chianti Cattis 100% Sangiovese. Or, a bit of Canaiolo or something chucked in, fine, Brunello or whatever. But there is the concession now that Chianti can have quite a chunk of Merlot or Cabernet in it, and I think that just completely ruins the party for me, and then it just ends up not tasting individual enough. What I love about Sangiovese on its own, grown in the soils that suit it, and there are very few of those. Most Sangiovese is really working class, glugging wine to go with a stick and some baguette and some cheese, whatever. But when you get to one of those special places like Tuscany, it has incredible texture. I used to describe it as having crenellations, like mannerism. It has texture. Like you can taste the road. You can taste this kind of the kind of detail in the wine. It's not about smoothness and kind of lift music. Um, this is more jazz than that. There's a huge amount of detail in good quality Sangiovese. Let's try this. Oh, well, the nose is lovely. Nose smells of black cherry, a little bit of tar, like kind of coal tar soap. Not in a bad way, just dark, quite graphitey and iron rich. It gives there's a sense of dryness on the nose, but there is this lovely warm morello cherry, black cherry fruit. Oh, so delicious. Um, I'm going to reach for some cheddar or something in a minute. I need something with this. Maybe a bit of salami, maybe beer sausage or something. I don't know, but that's absolutely delicious. And I can taste, like I said, the little details, the little cracks in the pavement, as it were. And I love that about this wine. And it makes it interesting at not an inconsiderable price. If you can go into a top gastro pub in London or a small bistro or a decent Italian restaurant, and you can pick this up on the list for about 50 quid. I think you're doing quite well in London at current prices. Shame everything has to be so expensive, but I'm getting old, you see. Anyway, there we go. Brodio 2022. Another Fells banger. Ricassoli make a whole range of really fancy wines. They also make a very, very good, if I can remember what it's called, Casalvero, is it? No, I can't remember. Extremely good. I think it's been described as Chiantified Merlot, a very good Merlot as well, which is that's almost tautology. Not a lot of good Merlot in the world, but when you find it. Moving on from the other region of Italy, which is famous for red wine, if you're going to pick two, if you've got the Bordeaux and Burgundy of Italy, you're going to have Tuscany, Chianti, and you're going to have Piemonte, Barolo Barbaresco. And we're on to a wine which strangely has a real special place in my heart, which is the reason why I wanted to pick it. It's actually called Occhetti. I believe Occhetti is Italian for eyes. I'm not sure what that means. It's got a picture, quite a kind of Manet-like chap with a gun on the front. Not sure why it says Centrica Cacciatore di Canale. So I mean hunter of the canal. I don't know. But Occhetti Langhe Nebbiolo. I'll stop wittering now. This is from Piemonte, the maybe the most beautiful, the most picturesque. If you're going to take a region that looks exactly like you expect a wine region to look, like a cartoon picture of a vineyard with a church and maybe a steeple and a few monasteries and people working the vineyards, that's you looking down the valley or up the valley, should I say, from Barolo towards La Mora. It's Piemonte just looks like it reminds me of the opening title sequence to Rainbow, the children's program. Up above the trees and houses, Rainbow, and there's like kind of tree. It's like you almost expect there to be a house with somebody doing just crayoning some smoke out the top of it. Um, this wine is from one of, I think, the great estates. It's never been seen as one of the super premium estates, and I'd like to know why because I think some of their wines, particularly their single vineyard and Nunziata stuff, is amazing. Um, but this estate is named after Renato Ratti. I think he started making wine in the 40s, 50s, maybe. Maybe it was a bit later than that. But I met his son, Pietro Ratti, in 1994, 30 years ago, on a trip which I won at the Wine and Spirit Educational Trust. Every year they do prizes, and I won the prize for cleverest wanker of the year. And I was invited to Piemonte in 1994 on all expenses paid trip, which was a bit of a catastrophe. Actually, it was very badly organised, but I had a brilliant time anyway. And one of the places we first went to, I think it was almost the first estate, was Renato Ratti, where we drank his the main wine, which is called Marcinasco, and we had the 1990 Marcinasco. Now, Petro Ratti's father, Renato, died in 1988. So this was actually the first wine which Pietro had made all by himself. And he was my age. He must have been like 26, 25 at the time. He was a young man with the weight of a very famous wine estate on his shoulders. And the weather was grim. I remember us talking, and we had some lardo, which is a sort of cuts of fat, pork fat, with some grissini sticks and drank his wine. I remember thinking, wow, these wines are amazing. And that was a moment I first realized how incredible Barolo and Barbaresco can be, this being Barolo. And he's in the village of La Mora, which is one of the great Bethlehems, one of the great epicenters of fantastic vineyards. And that was 30 years ago. We're now 2024. This is the 2022 vintage. This wine's available at places like Ferrum Wine Cellar, run by a former boss of mine. Uh, what have got? Ferrum Wine Cellar, Rodney Fletcher Vintners, Alexander Hadley again, Venum online. They tend to be very good value. That's VINVM. Baythorn Wine. Anyway, I've told you where you can buy it. It's from Fells initially, and this wine is not actually from the Brolo vineyards or from Lamora or whatever, but it's in fact a DOC. So it actually comes from the Langhe, which is the soils, the limestone soils, further down the hill. This wine, contrary to the rules of Barolo, does not have to spend 3 years or 2 years, whatever, in oak drying out, but is a wine that you can drink young because it's spent a year in wood, which is enough to support it, but not so much that you actually draw out and desiccate the fruit. You're left with lots of lovely, juicy fruit. So rather than spending, let's say, 20 quid on a really cheap, mediocre Barolo, because I think Barolo starts around 20 quid these days, you should buy something like this Ratti Nebbiolo delle Langhe for £24. You're getting 3 times the wine, 5 times the wine, and certainly 10 times the expertise and about 10 times the provenance. There we go. I won't say that again. I can't remember what I said. Anyway, but if you look at this, this is Nebbiolo. This is a grape variety which, like Pinot Noir, is made from big, thin-skinned grapes. It's grapes that can handle fog. Nebbiolo meaning big fog. So rather suited to the area. But the wine doesn't have much colour normally, as points out. Oh god, the wine smells fantastic. The wine smells like rose hips, nutbon, Swedish thing. Rose hips, kind of rose petally, but roses and raspberries, maybe cranberry. God, that smells good. There's a little hint. Famously, a guy called, I think it was Remington Norman, who wrote the book Tar and Roses, which was about um, Nebbiolo. And my friend Simon has a wine company in Victoria called Tile Roses, where they grow very good Nebbiolo. There's the connection. Ah, you see, it's not everyone's cup of tea. This because it's lean. It's lean and linear. It's athletic. It's Zola Bud. It's not Fatima Whitbread. You know, it's not. It's not a big athlete. It's sleek, and it doesn't have big mouthfeel and juicy fruits and jam, the obvious things. This wine is almost like the supporting structure for those things. And if you have a juicy steak or maybe a little bit of game or some squab pigeon or maybe some lovely runny cheese, and you have this wine provides all the things that are missing from that experience, and they support each other beautifully. And I think that even though it's only spent a year in oak and it's not from premium soils and from slightly more what we call precocious soils, wines that reviewed wines that are ready to drink earlier, um, I think this wine's good for 10 years at least, and it's probably going to make some people very happy in restaurants over the next decade. Wow, that's good, and that glass shape is perfect. So don't spend 30 quid on a Pinot Noir goblet. Um, Befriend your friend in your local pub and steal a couple of gin chalices, and that'll see you right. Okay, this is opening up all the time, but I think this one has it. 17 quid, 24 quid. I'd pay the extra £7 for the ratty. We've had the trim back. The trim back was lovely. Let's go back to that, see if it's opened up at all. Oh, it has. Tastes more like Mayor lemon and mandarin now. It's getting more exotic. Still bone dry, really bone dry. Lovely. I can imagine that with caramelized onions. Maybe like a hot dog would be perfect with that. I don't know. Right, we've got one more wine to show. Uh, Chris Blandy, charming man, handsome, intelligent human being who lives in Madeira. I think it's probably the oldest existing Madeira house, and they've absorbed other houses like Cossack Gordon's and things over the years. And he was extremely generous to my wife and me when we visited Madeira on the way to talking on a cruise ship a few years ago. But this is another wine import from Fells. This is Madeira. We don't do Madeira often on this channel because it's hard to come by, expensive and niche. But Madeira is made one of two ways. You can either make cheap Madeira, and it's made usually from one variety, which is the vast majority of grapes on the island of Madeira, because it crops twice. It's very warm down there, so you get two crops. It's the only way you can justify the cost of actually planting grapes because it's much, much more profitable to grow bananas. A grape variety called Tintanegra or Tintanegra Mole is the grape variety of choice. Although, as a variety, although it's capable of making some interesting wine with age, it's a bit funky, a bit cheesy. Doesn't have it just doesn't sit in my mind as something with nobility. It feels like I don't know, tea in a bag rather than leaf tea. It's kind of does some of the job and shows people what Madeira is without dazzling them, right? There are other varieties. You've got the dry variety of Cercial, then you've got Verdelho, great variety from Portugal, high in acid, makes wonderful medium dry Madeiras. Then you've got Buol, which makes the sweeter styles. Then you've got Malmsey or Malvasia, which makes very sweet ones. There are other varieties which are very rare, Terrantes and a few others. But this wine here is actually made not from Tintanegra, but actually made from a blend of Buol and Malvasia. There are two ways to make Madeira. You can make cooking Madeira by literally putting the wine in a big kettle, a big tank with a heating element, and they raise it up to about 45 degrees, which is almost bath temperature. And after a few weeks, the wine's been cooked out. It can't get any more cooked. It's madeirized, which is where we get our phrase from, oxidized to the max, and you end up with a wine which is this kettle. And that's called an estufage. The estufage process um, is the way that most Madeira is made. Certainly, cooking Madeira or the glass that old people in Madeira have with their coffee. They're just having a little shot. If you go serious, and I'm afraid Madeira, very little Madeira in the world, and it's getting very expensive very quickly, then you use a different process, and that is patience, time, rewards, quality Madeira. And they have cellars, they have lofts called cantera. And if the barrel's left there with the lid off, in the right spot, with the right humidity, with the right evaporation process, they open these slats in the different cantera to get the right level of evaporation, you end up with a wine which is far more exquisite. The only other wine I know that's made this way is Musca del Stubal, south of Lisbon. You must have heard me talk about that last year. I was doing quite a lot of work with them. It's kind of a muscat made into a Madeira, somewhere between a Madeira and a Tawny Port, anyway. But here we have a wine which is 5 years old. 5 years is the minimum that a Cantera wine can be, or a Cantero wine can be bottled at. Um, and if you leave it for a long time, it becomes a Fresheta, which is incredibly expensive, very special. These wines live forever. This is a half bottle, half litre, forgive me, 50 cl. So very good value considering this is 19.5% alcohol. And this wine's 15.99. I thought it'd be more expensive than that. I've got to be honest. And you can buy this from the Whiskey Exchange, where I buy all my spirits online. Well done, Dawn Davis. From Amethyst Drinks, all those shops in London now. You've got Cambridge wine merchants who specialise in fortifiers and do a great job of it. And of course, you've got good old Waitrose. Waitrose selling this, and it's 15.99 for a half-litre bottle, which I think is amazing value because every mouthful of this wine, every sip of this wine is like wine dynamite. The concentration, the freshness, the acidity is absolutely amazing. It's really funny when you think about Madeira. When I was at school, when I was younger, there were people on TV. This lady's called Hinge and Bracket, which was a drag act, really, who sat by a piano singing silly songs from the 20s. Ooh, would you like a glass of Edinburgh cream? And Madeira was kind of seen as being that was the target audience. You know, ladies drinking little tiny schooners of coupettes of sweet wine of a Sunday with the vicar. Madeira is hardcore, man. Madeira, like sherry, is drunk by dockers. It's strong, it's intense, it's powerful stuff. Uh, it's amazing with food, especially with cheeses, strong cheeses. Wow, that wine smells of really high class, like really high class, well made caramel toffee. There's a smell which I mentioned before called torréfaction in French. Torréfaction or roasted coffee. It's like the hint of when you smell a bag of ground coffee before you've opened it, and it's just like that whiff, that notion, because it's so strongly smelling that it comes out of the bag, even though it's sealed. You get that smell of coffee, which I experienced only this morning. We brought back some very nice coffee from Sweden. That smell of roasted coffee, or fruitiness, of nuttiness, of maybe dried fig and dates, it's all there. This wine's only 5 years old. You can buy Madeira that's 150, 160 years old, and it doesn't change. It's like whiskey. You can open it and just leave it there. It won't change. It's done all the aging it's going to. Um, so 16 quid for this, or if you buy a 1972 Buell, you're looking at maybe 400-500 euros a bottle. So it rapidly gets more expensive. Um, but I understand why people collect it. Sorry. Apologies for the swearing. Do not swear. You're live and in the house. That is amazing wine. I mean, truly, truly amazing. Absolutely delicious. 16 quid will not buy you a more exciting sweet wine this Christmas. Thank you. Thank you very much to Johnny Fells. Thank you to Annie Lim for sending them to me. I did not buy these wines, but I'm sure as shit going to drink them. See you next time.